that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
All right, folks, welcome to the program. Thanks so much for being with us. We appreciate it very, very much. The phone number, 870-275-9799. It has been one of those mornings. It's been one of those mornings that I have been battling technical problems on the other side of that glass, where, you get here, you have plenty of time, and it's not enough because technology, not Mother Nature, but it feels like whatever the computer equivalent of Mother Nature, where you're just like, well, the motherboards. It just doesn't want to work. But we are up and broadcasting at youtube.com and facebook.com/Conduit News. If you go to the YouTube channel, please subscribe, click the little bell to receive notifications so that you can get these smaller YouTube videos that get uploaded throughout the day from great interviews. Like we're going to have an interview. I'm going to introduce you to Mr. Clark Kendall, author of a book called Middle Class Millionaire: Surprisingly Simple Strategies to Grow and Enjoy Your Wealth. But look, this is why we're having him on. We're having him on because it was an interesting question. Why are young people attracted to socialism? And that's what we're going to talk about. Why are young people attracted to socialism? That's coming up at 6:33. Let's see here. What else do we have? Okay, we do have an update here on the murder case, the investigation surrounding the murder of Linda Collins. It's still so raw to even say that, and it hurts. But John Moritz reporting yesterday, Randolph County, they did formally charge the person that they arrested last Friday, Rebecca O'Donnell. They charged her with capital murder. They charged her with abuse of a corpse, as well as hindering physical evidence. Abuse of a court and hindering physical evidence. There was no plea entered. I don't know what that means. Hindering, some sort of, in the crime scene shows it would say, tampering with evidence. So hindering, I don't know what that entails. I'm sure some of you maybe do. But I think the abuse of the corpse charge probably has something to do with the fact that, Linda's body was found outside. I think it has something to do with the fact that, according to reports, they were not readily identifying her. They said she, apparently had been deceased for a while. And this story by John Moritz in the Arkansas Democrat Gazette actually reveals that the investigators, they had to use dental records to identify that it was, in fact, Senator Collins. So, still a gag order in terms of information. So there's so much that we do not know still in this. Please continue to pray for the family in this tragic situation. I understand that the family will not be making any more statements that unless they come through the spokesperson, Ken Yang, who is handling himself. I know Ken personally. He's handling himself very, just a level of professionalism that is very high. And so continue to pray for the investigators. Continue to pray that the truth would be known in this. Telephone number is 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. Oh, you know who I got to sit down with? I got to, the Conduit for Commerce scorecard came out yesterday, and I got to sit down with the, Conduit co-founders, Mr. Joe Maynard and Brenda Vassar-Taylor yesterday. Interviewed them. We're going to play that coming up here at 7:05. It was a really refreshing interview. about really the state of where we are. You know, this scorecard, all of the scorecards, and there's different ones. You know, you have ones that are focused on economic freedom, ones that are focused on social issues, maybe more national ones, and really they are all just a snapshot and a tool to use to kind of see where are we right now when it comes to the size and scope of our government. That's what I think it is. And so if you haven't gotten that scorecard yet, you need to go to conduitforcommerce.org and check it out, see where your legislator is, see where they ranked, just see how they voted, too. Like there's different bills on there that are scored, and then you can ask them, hey, did you vote for this or against this? If they have a low score, they probably didn't vote the way, the way Conduit preferred in terms of were you for this bill or against this bill. And you can see the weights and everything else and what was weighted. And we went over that at length with Josh Waters yesterday on the program. Got a few big headlines here I want to get to about these new emails that are now showing that Obama State Department's officials had a role in the what is now called the Trump coup. We will talk about that. Also, I want to talk a little bit about coming up about Hillary Clinton and what she said. She's saying that the claims about her campaign in Russia are outlandish, and she's doing something very smart. I'll tell you what she's doing. She's obviously playing on the complicit news media and the ignorant populace, but I don't think it's going to work. But it's kind of like her only play left. Before we do that, did anyone see Kevin Sorbo in what he was tweeting out the other day? Now, this is from the Daily Wire. They have some of the best articles, I think, out there when it comes to the culture war and things like that. And so I always go there for, like, culture stories. This is really more of a story that's just about Kevin Sorbo tweeting. You know, he's the actor who played Hercules. He's also a professing Christian, and he has been in some movies, you know, some of those Christian movies and that sort of thing. Actor Kevin Sorbo's 3 tweets about sex, abortion, and immigration set the internet ablaze. And so we read here, and he makes an incredible amount of sense. Let's see here. This is what he tweeted. If women are upset about Trump's naughty words, who in the hell bought 80 million copies of 50 Shades of Grey? 50 Shades of Grey is that book that women bought a few years ago that was apparently, I don't know because I haven't read it, but it was described to me as essentially, you know, porn in a way. Have you heard it described that way, Joe? Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, or smut or something like that. Oh, it's okay. This here describes it as an erotic novel. Okay, an erotic novel. Then Kevin Sorbo goes back. I mean, these are just 3, you know, punches to the gut of the left. Kevin Sorbo, 68 people were killed in mass shootings in 2018. Did you know that about 2,000 were killed by illegal aliens? Just saying, build the wall. And that one, of course, the left freaked out about that, and they started using their statistics about mass shootings, right? And, of course, Joe, the left statistics on mass shootings, they say things like, you know, thousands and thousands of people died last year in mass shootings, but it's because their definition of a mass shooting is extremely broad. And their school shooting definition is also not what you would think of as well. Yeah, that's broad. Sorbo's claim that some 2,000 Americans are killed by illegal immigrants was widely decried online, but seems to be legitimate, according to Daniel Horowitz at Conservative Review. Quote, Immigration and Customs Enforcement released its annual report on deportations, and the numbers are startling. In fiscal year 2018, ICE made 158,000 administrative arrests, of which 138,000 had a prior criminal record. The total 542,000 criminal convictions and arrests occurred between these aliens is simply astounding. Every one of these crimes, by definition, is avoidable because the perpetrator shouldn't be here in the first place, and indeed wouldn't be here if not for the magnets, lack of border wall and sanctuary cities and courts. 2,028 homicide offenses, 5,562 robberies, 11,766 weapon offenses, 50,753 assault charges, 76,585 dangerous drug charges, 80,730 DUIs, and over 12,000 sexual offenses, and a partridge in a pear tree. And on Sunday night, Sorbo went back to Twitter and said, quote, "A party that supports abortion over life, illegal aliens over its citizens, and refugees over its veterans is going to lecture me on morals? Don't think so." You know, these are just the little things. Now, you know what somebody hashtagged this in response? Hashtag Jerkules. So there's some people on the left who are triggered by this that have a little bit of a sense of humor. Until they outlaw the word jerk, is somehow, they got to find they got to find a lot of people who are very much oppressed or victimized by the word jerk. And then, of course, you won't be able to say that word or make jokes about it anymore. And as a matter of fact, the person who tweeted Jerkules will have to either go back and delete the tweet or write a lengthy apology once it's discovered in their history as they progress through their professional life when somebody finds out you used the word jerk one time. And that's exactly what's happening. They kicked a guy out of Harvard. This is disturbing. This is extremely disturbing. That they kicked and we'll talk about this, but they admitted a guy to Harvard University, and he's part of, I think, the Parkland shooting, and he's a victim there. And then, of course, they've rescinded his admission because people doxed him. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the program this morning. All right, sorry about that. That's a little preview. Well, the good news is the technological problems appear to have worked. But it appears that the technological problems appear to have been resolved. So that's good news. Thank goodness that we figured that out. The telephone number, 870-275-9799. Here is Hillary Clinton. Trump makes outlandish claims about my campaign in Russia. This is what she said over to Breitbart now. Former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton accused President Trump of making outlandish claims after he pointed out in a recent interview that her presidential campaign paid an ex-British spy to produce a dossier based on Russian sources that claimed his campaign was colluding with Russia. Now, we all know this, right? We all know this as avid talk radio listeners, firmly planted on the right side of the political spectrum. But listen to this. Quote, this is a direct quote from Trump to George Snuffleupagus. Hillary Clinton conspired with Russia. She had somebody that came out of Russia. They got information from Russia. Excuse me. Hillary Clinton was totally involved with it. That's the one. If you talk about collusion with Russia, take a look at Christopher Steele. All his contacts with Russia, which, by the way, she paid for, and turned out to be a phony deal, which everyone is now admitting that. No, George, all I want is the truth. All I want is fairness. Now, by the way, the ratings for this interview in ABC were not what you would expect. They were down. But I find it encouraging that the president is taking his message and at least standing up for himself, speaking the truth about what really happened on a network like ABC to an anchor, a former Clinton employee like George Snuffleupagus. Now, is it bad that I'm comparing him to a Sesame Street character? Is that somehow anti-Greek? He later said Clinton had much more to do with Russia than anything having to do with our campaign. Another quote here. We had nothing to do with Russia. Hillary Clinton had much more to do with Russia than anything having to do with our campaign. It said very specifically that not only that we didn't have to do, but we rebuffed them. Now, anything having to do with Russia had nothing to do with our campaign. So what did Hillary Clinton say? Well, she went the only play she could. She went with the play that somehow the Mueller report was legitimate in the first place. The Mueller investigation was legitimate in the first place. And she went with the fact that because of Mueller, there were then process crimes where people were indicted. Quote, on the one hand, the president makes nonstop outlandish claims in his recent ABC interview about my campaign in Russia. On the other hand, Paul Manafort, Michael Cohen, Roger Stone, Michael Flynn, Rick Gates, George Papadopoulos, and the entire Mueller report. Now, so she's trying to do some sort of equivalent of a digital mic drop here, but the fact of the matter is, these people, take Manafort, for example. Did he mention Manafort? Did she mention? Oh, did I say he? I meant, yeah. I meant she. Yeah, she mentioned Manafort. Manafort gets in trouble for talking to Mueller, and they find out some stuff he did 20 years ago that had nothing to do with Trump. And they charge him, they throw the book at him because they're wanting him to somehow squeal on Trump or really and truly lie about Trump. And that's what there are reports out there that this is really what they were trying to do. They wanted to get people to lie about the president. And so far that hasn't happened. And then you look at somebody like George Papadopoulos, who we now know was spied on, or somebody like Carter Page, and how this was all a giant setup that was started, the catalyst, the inception. You ever see that movie Inception where they try to incept something in somebody's brain? That the inception of the entire thing was done by foreign agents sent into the campaign to start those discussions. And so it was kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy, but it was done intentionally, and it was made to look like that there was, that somebody actually said. It all goes back to what was the genesis of the operation. Was it really some guy in a bar talking about Russia, or was that guy already told about Russia? It is. Let me tell you something. Papadopoulos, these other people, they could easily be very wealthy men when this is all said and done. And I think they will be. Papadopoulos, Carter Page, I think they will be. But of course, so she's talking about she's solely relying on the Mueller report, solely relying on the indictments, many of which are process crimes, so that you wouldn't be indicted if it wasn't for Robert Mueller being appointed. Meaning, just him talking to you is what got you indicted, not anything he was originally tasked to investigate, which is really frustrating. But what is Hillary Clinton doing here? She's counting on the fact that the mainstream media have whipped everyone up into a frenzy, convincing you that Donald Trump is a KGB agent loyal to Russia, right? Remember when the left and the media used to love the Soviet Union and Russia? What happened to that, by the way? I know. There's nothing that brings out hypocrisy more than Donald Trump being in the White House. Meaning, if you're a Democrat, you don't care about any of your previous standings, principles. You don't care about looking like a hypocrisy because you just personally can't stand the man. And you want him out of office, and the ends justify the means. And if that means, your dignity and trustworthiness, so be it. But real quick, we have Lindsey Graham responding. As if that was not bad enough, the foreign national compiled an unverified dossier that was then used by the FBI to obtain a warrant against an American citizen and surveil an American presidential campaign. House Freedom Caucus chairman responding, but instead of digging deeper on this, how a false Democrat-purchased dossier sourced to Russian agents was allowed to be back-channeled into our Justice Department, spread as factual, and then featured to open an investigation. This is where we go. Give me a break. We're going to take a break. Speaking of breaks, don't go anywhere. Back in a minute. Here at Conduit News, I want to introduce you to Mr. Andrew Langer. Andrew is the president of the Institute for Liberty. You've read his stuff over at the American Spectator, as well as townhall.com. And Andrew, welcome to the program, sir. It's a pleasure to meet you.
It is great to be on with you this morning.
Absolutely. So the website, instituteforliberty.org. First of all, just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved. I understand founding Institute for Liberty back in 2008.
Well, I understand I didn't actually found it. I inherited it. I'd like to say I won it in a card game, but no, I inherited it from a friend of mine who became a successful author. I've been involved in politics and public policy for the last quarter century, and I've found that policy is, to me, much more interesting and much more important. I mean, listen, we all like the blood sport of politics, but when it comes down to it, I'm very interested in solving problems and addressing issues that are facing people. And this is why I took over the Institute.
Hey, folks, it's me, Paul Harrell. I want to say hello to everybody out there who's listening. We appreciate you and your support, especially those listening on KFPW, the Marshall out of Fort Smith. 96.7 FM, 1230 AM. You know, for all of our listeners, if you ever miss the program, you can get us online at conduitnews.com, facebook.com/conduitnews, or our YouTube channel. Just search for Conduit News and be sure to click the subscribe button and click the little bell to receive notifications. Here at Conduit News Radio, we provide you multiple ways to listen to your number one source for Arkansas news and politics. ConduitNews.com.
Need your daily news fix? Don't forget to tune in to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, folks, welcome back to the program. Thanks so much for being with us. Telephone number 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. You can call or text if you would like to contribute to the program. Let's see here. We have some people saying, hang on one second here. We have some people saying that the study of economics is a waste of time. Have you heard about this? I want to talk more about this when we come back. Well, this is the Washington Post headline, actually. It says, oh, no, I'm sorry. The actual headline is more states are forcing students to study personal finance. Washington Post says it's a waste of time. Study after study shows that financial literacy courses don't change behavior. Now, why would you think that is? Why is that? It says here, the Post, financial education simply doesn't work. It doesn't change behavior, as numerous studies have shown. Indeed, the fact that giving people information does not by itself change how they act is one of the most firmly established in social science. Whether the subject is the dangers of drug use, the value of getting vaccinated, or the calories in a restaurant's bacon cheeseburger, the same is true of finance. So they're saying it's a waste. Well, okay, we'll get rid of PE, and those three examples are ridiculous. Thank you, Joe. But this is the Washington Post. It's the Washington Post, and they've got to throw something out there. Did you see? Was it Jessica Biel that came out? Well, the headline was that she came out against vaccinations, but she didn't really come out against vaccinations. It's anything she came out cautioning. I don't know. Anyway. But anyway, I want to talk a little bit about this when we come back from break. I want to introduce you to a guy who has written a book about it's called The Middle Class Millionaire. Anyway, his name's Clark Kendall, and he's got this book coming out. We're going to talk about socialism, though, and why it's so appealing, and kind of compare that with how do we cure financial illiteracy. You have this article saying that it doesn't really work. These classes don't really work. I think this is in a way is connected. I'll tell you this much. You know what the best thing is for curing socialism? Practically, this dawned on me the other day. I was thinking, how do we beat back socialism? The best thing to cure socialism is getting a job and going out and working and realizing the value of creating something for yourself, and then realizing, seeing the tax dollars drained out of your check. That'll change somebody's mentality real quick about putting all of our money into one big pot and then dividing it up equally.
Liberty in 2008, I got very tired of having to deal with, bureaucratic organizations. Issues pop up, and it's important that we have organizations that are able to turn on a dime and fire for effect. That's a lot of what we do with the Institute for Liberty.
That's great. Well, so I want to have you on talk a little bit about property rights.
Sure.
I saw this story headline over at the dailycaller.com where it says environmentalists target Oregon ranchers pardoned by Trump with a lawsuit. What can you tell us about this?
Well, I mean, listen, and I want to preface this by saying we do not condone illegal activity. And the Hammocks, the father and son, they did engage in illegal activity, really as a protest. But again, we don't condone this. But they've grown frustrated given a lot of the grazing restrictions that were being put on by the Obama administration. There were a series of protests, including the takeover of that headquarters of the wildlife refuge in Oregon. These guys were punished. They were fined. They did their time. And then they were eventually pardoned by President Trump, and they want to get their lives in order. And so they go back to doing what they do best, which is grazing. And it's ironic that from a movement which is trying to make sure that felons have the right to vote and that the small businesses can't ask someone if they have a criminal conviction on their record, that apparently you need to have some kind of pristine background in order to graze cattle on the public land. And we find that incredibly hypocritical. And so these guys are faced with this lawsuit.
And so, it's politically motivated, right? They're just probably people that just they don't like the fact that they were pardoned by the president.
Well, absolutely. It's that. It's the fact that they don't like the fact that the Hammonds protested. It's the fact that they are opposed to any kind of utilization of public lands. Well, let's be really clear here. West of the Rockies, the vast majority of the lands are held and owned by the federal government, and they're managed for a variety of uses. A lot of folks, for instance, think that U.S. Forest Service lands are managed for recreation, for camping and hiking, whereas really they're managed by the U.S. Department of Agriculture specifically for timber production. And so you get lands like the lands owned by the Bureau of Land Management, which is the Department of the Interior. These are lands that are being managed for grazing and for utilization. And so you have this inherent tension between the environmentalists, and the Hammonds get caught in the crossfire. They protested restrictions, they got pardoned, and so these environmentalists are suing to make sure that or to try to get their grazing permits overturned.
To talk a little bit about this shift, it's almost, I can't think of a better word than suicidal. And I guess I just mean from a civilization standpoint. I mean, we need these resources, and we need people to work the land in order to take care of ourselves, in order to feed ourselves. And it seems like
The intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, 870-275-9799 is the telephone number. We're going to hit you with two memes of the day today. Two memes of the day, not just one, because we ran out of time yesterday. Do what? I know. I'm just saying we're going to hit you with two today. We're going to get you one by the end of this hour, and then we're going to get you one at the because we have to make up for it. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. Folks, please welcome to the program. His name is Clark Kendall, and he's the author of an upcoming book called Middle Class Millionaire, Surprisingly Simple Strategies to Grow and Enjoy Your Wealth. Clark, welcome, sir. How are you?
I'm doing well. Paul, it's an honor to be on your show. Thank you for having me this morning.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. So let me ask you something. First of all, tell us about this book. Why did you want to write this book?
Well, I've been in the investment management business for more than 30 years. It's a simple, basically, how-to book. A third of it's for the new investors, how to accumulate wealth. A third of it's for the people I want to retire. Do I have enough money? And the last third's for the retirees. How do I go about spending it? How do I go about gifting it? And then I share real-life stories as far as people, how they met their objectives, and the real life of how they implement these various strategies.
So let me ask you this. We have in the President's State of the Union address several months ago, says we will never be a socialist country. Yet we've got socialists who are getting into power. You have one, at least, well, I think most of those presidential candidates on the Democrat side are probably socialists. But why is it so appealing right now in this country?
Well, a scary statistic of the people who retire at 65, the average retirement savings is $250,000, but the median, meaning half the people, have less than only $65,000. That tells me if the average is $250,000, that a few people have figured out how to take advantage of 401ks and IRA accounts and Rothing, But a vast majority of people, half the people, only have $65,000 when they go to retire. So I think the financial literacy, as you pointed out previously, is a big problem in our country. There was an article about a month ago in the Wall Street Journal that Harvard is now, for all incoming freshmen, requiring a personal financial management class. And I do think, education, and I'll disagree with the Washington Post. I think when people are educated, they can make, good choices. So hopefully other schools within our country will be following Harvard's lead as far as educating our students and next generation on personal finance.
It was such a weird article. I don't even know why they wrote it. Like, they're saying that essentially classes on financial literacy don't work. People aren't following the advice. I mean, I'm not even sure how they could possibly know that.
Yeah, I live in the Washington D.C. area. I've read the Washington Post for over 50 years. The few instances that I have known the facts and I've read about it in the Washington Post, it's scary how the facts can be distorted in the paper. So I think it goes to prove, whether you read the Washington Post, the New York Times, or any newspaper, you need to take it with a kind of a grain of salt, because the few instances where I've known the facts, it's scary to me how it's reported in the media. So
socialism, though, talk about it. I mean, like, why the young people want socialism? The young people want free stuff. They don't want to have to learn about, financial literacy and IRAs and mutual funds or what. They don't want to learn about that stuff. They'd rather just, is that the reason? They'd rather just continue to get free stuff and not have to put in the work themselves?
Well, I'm a father of 4 children, and I share with my children the statistic. There's 350 million people in the United States. In India there's 1.3 billion. In China there's 1.4 billion. So there's 2.7 billion people in India and China alone. So roughly 1/10 of their population is almost as much as the United States. And it's the top 1% from India and China who want to come to the United States, and that's our competition in the world. And they're literally crossing borders. They're swimming to get into the United States. That's our competition, and so we need to be educated. Coming back to the whole socialist thing, what makes America great is the opportunity that you can be a waiter, you can be a busboy on Monday, and through education, you can become a doctor, a lawyer. You can run your own business. You can be very successful. And the people who want everything for free, it's going to come back and haunt them, I think.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody who immigrated here as a citizen. I think she's from Denmark. I can't remember that one of those countries. And she moved here, she was just telling me that it was incredible when she heard somebody say, okay, you're going to need a phone line. And this was years ago. You're going to need a phone. Go ahead and call for quotes. She said, quotes? What do you mean quotes? And because where she's from, there was there's one phone company, and you either, like the service and use it, or you just are not going to have a phone. But the idea that you could competitively shop around and potentially get a lower price somewhere else was unheard of. So there are all these benefits here and that's what I don't know if you saw that HBO series Chernobyl, but it was fantastic in terms of describing what Soviet Russia was actually like. And I can't even believe it got made, quite frankly. But when you don't have economic freedom, it seems to me you don't have other freedoms.
It's so true, so true. About a month ago, Bernie Sanders' tax return came out, and I actually reviewed them. It's scary. I mean, he made, $480,000. He's 77 years old. When you look at his tax returns, he had no distributions from an IRA account. So basically, he did not save any money within a retirement account. And as a federal employee, he could have used the TSP plan. Nor did his wife, who was president of a university, save any money. He owns 3 houses. He had what I think it was like $180 in interest income. So do the math. He probably had $25,000 or $30,000 in a savings account. and he had no dividend income. So you have, statistically, the top 1% as far as wealth if he earned $480,000, yet he does not own any stocks. He did not put any money into a retirement account, and he wants to be the leader of our country is a scary fact.
Wow.
And he only gave like $13,000 to charity too. He gave less than, about 3%. And I bet you a majority of your listeners give more than 3% to charities.
Yeah. Wow.
That's a scary fact.
Wow. Yeah, that is true. That is scary. So do you think that's because he's a principled communist? He's like, I don't want a part of this capitalistic system at all. I'll just take my wealth and hoard it in a bank and get no interest on it.
But the fact of the matter, he does own 3 houses, and
yeah,
it's a consumerism of America. Yeah.
Wow, that is fascinating. Well, we're talking, folks, with Mr. Clark Kendall. Again, he's the author of an upcoming book. When's it going to come out, Clark?
Today is the first day. Thanks for asking.
Hey,
it's
there we
available
go.
on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Target. You can also go to KendallCapital.com/books, and you can also order it through our website and find out more information about Kendall Capital.
That's fantastic. It's called Middle Class Millionaire, Surprisingly Simple Strategies to Grow and Enjoy Your Wealth. Clark Kendall, I appreciate it, sir. Thanks for coming on this morning and spending a little time with us.
Great. It was an honor to be on your show. Thank
Absolutely.
you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Folks, telephone number 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. Man, yeah, the thing I was telling you before we went to break, the last time, this cure for socialism, in my opinion, is got to be more what? Oh God!
Don't say that on air. Don't say it.
Oh, Joe made a joke. It's unrepeatable, absolutely unrepeatable. The cure for socialism. I'm trying to say is getting a job. Okay, I think getting a job. But we've got this whole mentality where you stay on your parents' insurance till you're 26. Follow your dreams and that sort of thing. Oh, that's what Nancy said. I mean, I'm all for people following their dreams, but I'm also for people understanding that you live till you're 80 or so, and then it's kind of all downhill from there. You know what I mean? So life is short, so you just got to get out there and go, 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 go. At least that's what I try to tell myself. But I mean, I fail just as much as the next guy at that kind of stuff. But yeah, get out there and get a job, and then all of a sudden your mentality changes. That's why there's so many young liberals. They don't understand that the policies that claim to help people oftentimes don't. Sometimes they do, but oftentimes they don't. They don't know that some people just use that for power. They use the oppressed or they use the poor to obtain and maintain political power. Most people don't realize that, but regardless of even getting into that, most people, because of self-interest, no, not greed, but self-interest, they go to the workforce. They might be a little liberal, but then they all of a sudden become a fiscal conservative because they say, "Hey, wait a second. I'm paying this money to the government, and they're doing what with it?" Well, that doesn't make any sense. And then all of a sudden, you have people, once they're in the workforce for 10 years or so, they see things a little differently. Meme of the day, meme of yesterday. Here's the meme of yesterday that we ran out of time. Meme of yesteryear. Here it is, ladies and gentlemen. This is kind of not a meme, but it is.
There's a meme right there.
Yeah. But this is courtesy of the silent majority. And you hear those war drums beating right now with Iran, right? I don't think the American people want a war. I don't think they didn't. They didn't want to go to war in Syria. They didn't want to go to war in Libya, but Obama and Hillary took us there, right? We came, we saw, he died. Talking about Muammar Gaddafi and how he died. Not very pleasant. Yeah. It's like, ooh. So there's that, and I mean, people just generally, and the president of the United States, I will say Donald Trump is very critical about going into Iraq. He was saying that the other day in the context of the 9/11 attacks. Going into Iraq was such a stupid idea. So what this meme is, for those of you that can't see it, it's a bumper sticker that says Iraq, but the Q at the end is...
It's like a speedometer. Or it's like an odometer.
Yeah, it's like an odometer. The Q at the end is rotating up, and an N, the letter N, is now replacing it, so it says Iran. And it's captioned a George Orwell quote: "The war is not meant to be won. It is meant to be continuous." George Orwell. That's pretty good. I'm looking forward to our meme of the day. This was our meme of yesterday, and our meme of the day will be...
It's pretty funny.
coming up in about an hour. We'll get to that. Folks, don't go anywhere. We're going to take a break. Going to reset here. The telephone number, 870-275-9799. This is Conduit News. Find out more at conduitnews.com. Arkansas, good morning. Thanks for listening. Back in a minute.
Are you a conservative-minded young person and want to let the world know about it? Are you tired of rolling your eyes as your professor regurgitates progressive, PC, neo-Marxist nonsense? Then you should interview on Conduit News Radio's Young Conservative segment and tell us about why you believe the way you do. Tell us how you came to be a conservative and what are your views on government. Now, if you're worried that your neo-Marxist professor may also be a right names can be changed to protect the innocent. It's the Conduit News Radio Conservative Future segment. To be interviewed, call 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
We have people that have just completely forgotten that, and so go ahead.
Yeah, you have folks that are sort of engaging in this surrealistic living where they think you can attack these kinds of institutions. You know, we're dealing with. I'll talk in a second about China and rare earth resources. It plays into it, but also from an intellectual property rights standpoint. You know, folks who don't see that when you use the power of government to attack intellectual property, that you have a real. I agree with you. It is essentially a suicidal tendency. You know, we've seen an instance in a number of states, Oregon, North Carolina, Arizona, in which, cronyist interests are using their power to the legislature to attack the intellectual property rights of people they do business with, to get the government to jailbreak contracts. That's a bad thing. We think folks need to pay attention to that. But in terms of this issue of the land utilization, you know, this is exactly what's going on with China. We've done this to ourselves, both by restricting access to minerals on the public lands, rare.
Exposing the truth and everything the Marble Palace establishment keep trying to cover up. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, we're welcome back. Here we go. We have this. I want to get this story in before the top of the hour because this is a reflection of where we are as a society, and it is tragic. We have a lot of people. I've said this a lot of time. People who want to be perfect. Matter of fact, people have a need to be perfect, but you can't be perfect. But we have these evolving standards. We have what I have dubbed news priests that have this rotating wheel of morality, and they can either condemn you based on their rotating wheel of morality of the day, moral outrage. It's a faux high ground, but they like to think that they are somehow they're the priests of the news, and they tell you what is a moral outrage and what is not. And then the very next day they can completely contradict themselves. So they can condemn you or they can absolve you of wrongdoing as well. They are the clergy of our day, an oppressive clergy, the news priests. So Harvard recently rescinds admission to a conservative by the name of Kyle Kashuff over a private racist remark he wrote at age 16, despite an apology and evidence of growth. This is a Ben Shapiro article from the Daily Wire. And he writes that our universities are irrevocably broken. And of course, this is Harvard. This is the pinnacle. And we were just talking about Harvard in their financial literacy class with Mr. Kendall last segment. Ben Shapiro writes that on Monday, Parkland survivor and outspoken conservative Kyle Kashuff announced that Harvard University had withdrawn his admission from the school over the revelation of racist, offensive, idiotic posts written on a private Google document with friends when he was 16. Never mind that Kashuff apologized publicly for his comments. Never mind that his public behavior has evinced no racism whatsoever. But forgiveness must be withheld. So the reason we do this is because, again, of the perception. We have these Harvard radicals. I'll give you another example how society is broken. MasterCard now is urging banks to allow you to put whatever name you want to put on your MasterCard credit card or debit card. The reason is because of the transgender people. They have IDs sometimes that don't match how they're dressed. For example, if you've got a guy named Chuck on his ID, this is his actual name. But he's dressed, let's say, like I don't know, a woman, and then that you ask to see ID and it doesn't match up because you don't know any Chucks that are. You see what I'm saying? And the embarrassment and the shame and the denial of service. They've been denial of service. Why? Because people want to make sure that it's not a stolen credit card. You get where we're going here. So MasterCard has now said, hey, you know what? We're urging all banks to let them just pick out a name. Pick out whatever name you want. It doesn't have to match your legal documents. Because the LGBTQRSTLNE, would you like to buy a Val community, they're undergoing the same plight that Black Americans did in the Civil Rights Movement. I mean, that's what they want you to think, right? You go from that to people saying, you know what, I shouldn't be discriminated against, or I shouldn't be looked down upon because I'm gay. It's like, okay, fine, this is America. Do what you want to do. No one cares. Live and let live. But then you go from that to, oh, you know what? I think my 8-year-old boy is really a girl. I'm going to start giving him hormone blockers. How did we get here? How did we actually get here? Anyway, so it's all, and that's perfectly fine. And if you were to say something about that, like, hey, you know what? I think that's child abuse. What do you mean that's child abuse? Are you for discrimination? Let the parents be parents. But if you have those same parents that, want to do something like promote a Christian biblical worldview with their kids, there's people that are saying these parents are abusive. And then you again have the news priests that will absolve or condemn based on a rotating moral scale. Once again, we're so upset that the cathedral at Notre Dame is burning. It represents a religion we love to see expressed in public life. No, you don't. But we had to be upset for the time. And this is the same mentality that has infected our universities. It's all on the left, and it is absolutely disgusting. So we can forgive the parents that are wanting to make their kids transgender by giving them hormone blockers, and we won't call that abuse. But then we have a guy who's made racist remarks when he was 16 on a Google document with his friends who says, you know what, I was really stupid, that was insensitive, and I'm sorry. No forgiveness. None. Not at all. No room to make mistakes. Unless you're on the left. So here is Kashif saying, 3 months after being admitted to Harvard class of 2023, Harvard has decided to rescind my admission over text and comments made nearly 2 years ago, months prior to the shooting. So he was a Parkland survivor. A few weeks ago, I was made aware of egregious and callous comments classmates and I made privately years ago when I was 16 years old, months before the shooting, in an attempt to be as extreme and shocking as possible. I immediately apologized. After I issued this apology, speculative articles were written, my peers used the opportunity to attack me, and my life was once again reduced to a headline. It sent me into one of the darkest spirals of my life. After the story broke, former peers and political opponents began contacting Harvard, urging them to rescind me. Harvard then sent this letter stating that Harvard reserves the right to withdraw an offer of admission and requested a written explanation within 72 hours. I responded to the letter with a full explanation, apology, and requested documents. I also sent an email to the Office of Diversity and Inclusion to seek guidance on how to right this wrong and work with them once I was on campus. Harvard decided to rescind my admission with the following letter. Somewhat ironically, the Office of Diversity and Inclusion sent me this response regarding my apology, quote, "Thank you for your email. We appreciate your thoughtful reflections and look forward to connecting with you upon your matriculation in the fall of 2020. After receiving Harvard's letter revoking my acceptance, I responded by asking for the opportunity to have an in-person meeting to make my case face-to-face and work towards any possible path of reconciliation. Harvard responded by declining my meeting request. Harvard deciding that someone can't grow, especially after a life-altering event like the shooting, is deeply concerning. If any institution should understand growth, it's Harvard, which is looked to as the pinnacle of higher education despite its checkered past. Throughout its history, Harvard's faculty has included slave owners, segregationists, bigots, and anti-Semites. If Harvard is suggesting that growth isn't possible and that our past defines our future, then Harvard is an inherently racist institution, but I don't believe that. I believe that institutions and people can grow. I've said that repeatedly. In the end, this isn't about me. It's about whether we live in a society in which forgiveness is possible or mistakes brand you as irredeemable as Harvard has decided for me. So now what? I'm figuring it out, he says. I had given up huge scholarships in order to go to Harvard, and the deadline for accepting other college offers has ended. I am exploring all options at the moment. Ben Shapiro writes, as far as Harvard qualifications, they weren't based on his activism. Kashif was ranked second in his class with a weighted GPA of 5.345 and an unweighted GPA of 3.9. He scored 1550 on his SATs, but Kashif's activism has been impressive nonetheless. He has worked consistently across the aisle to bring about school safety measures to protect other high schoolers, and that his terrible comments were written before the life-changing event the mass shooting at Parkland represented. Kashif's comments were originally surfaced by fellow students who oppose him politically in an overt attempt to damage him. Kashif did the right thing and issued an immediate apology. So Kashif gets accepted to Harvard after the Parkland shooting, but because he's a conservative, they essentially go back and find something damning. And in a normal world, Shapiro writes, this would have been enough. Kashif is 18 years old, and he wrote the comments when he was 16. He didn't commit a crime. He didn't espouse his gross views publicly. His behavior since has not been mimicked. But our society says, no, what you did is unforgivable. This is the country we live in. We got one more hour coming your way next.
The news and talk of Northeast Arkansas. This is News Talk 101.3 FM and 12:30 AM KBTM, Jonesboro, an EAB radio station.
Minerals on public lands, and then by not ratifying the law of the sea treaty and taking us out of the game from getting access to these resources under the seabed. Both of these are tied together, and it is it is very damaging to the republic overall.
So kind of elaborate. What do you mean by China? Are you talking about their quest to have all these rare earth minerals or elements, and they kind of have a corner on the market? Is that what you're referring to?
Well, that's exactly it. I mean, China doesn't have any more of these rare earth elements than we do. It's just that China is willing to go the extra step and is willing to remove the regulatory restrictions, or not to have any regulatory restrictions on getting them. We could, if we wanted to, much in the same way that folks said that we could not be a petroleum independent or a petroleum exporter, and we did that to ourselves over the course of many years of public policy. We could, if we wanted to, become very competitive on this if we would remove regulatory barriers and if we would go down the road of ratifying the Law of the Sea Treaty, which would give our U.S. companies access to these minerals under the seabed. We've done neither, and so we are caught behind the eight ball.
Not that I didn't really want to get into this necessarily, but
no worries.
I can't help ask the question. So, what do you think about the trade war with China? I mean, if anything, it's good that it has exposed yet another way we could be independent.
Well, that's absolutely true. I mean, it's one of those situations in which you have to think empirically about global trading markets. And as my father said to me on New Year's Eve, he said, "Andrew, there are many roads to utopia. All, however, must traverse the surface of the earth. You have to be willing to deal with the world the way it is, not the way you want it to be." And so I'm a free trader. I believe in free trade. But I also have to recognize that there are countries out there that massively distort the marketplace. And so we have to be willing to engage in the same kind of economic tactics in order to make sure that America puts its own interests first. We could spend hours talking about this. The Jones Act is a prime example. It's something that I initially, on its face, would oppose. This is this act that sort of restricts the ability of American flag ships. They have to be built in America. They have to be crewed by Americans. And on its face, you think, well, this is anti-competitive. But then you realize there are other issues at work here, including making sure that America has a shipbuilding industry and a ship repair industry for national security reasons. So you have to deal with the world as it is.
We're talking with Andrew Langer. He's the president of the Institute for Liberty. I wanted to ask you one more question about that. Do you find it odd that the political establishment seems to be more comfortable with China than Russia? A couple of examples. We do have wide reports of Chinese lobbying American politicians by paying their children money. It seems to be acceptable to do business with China in terms of taxpayer incentives. Here in Arkansas, we've got several deals with Chinese companies that are supposed to come here, use our resources, send the profits back home, but they're all on hold. I'm glad, because of the Trump stance on China. If that were Russia, though, if we had these reports of Russia doing these things, I think people's heads would explode. So why does it appear that China is more acceptable to do business with?
Well, besides the fact that China has spent a great deal of time and effort to try to burnish its image, they have a very close society. You really can't see the abuses that go on there, and China's been very subtle. A lot of folks forget that back in 2001, after George W. Bush took office, all of our attention was focused on the Chinese threat, which is part of the reason why we missed the 9/11 attacks, because that's where our focus was. China was the big competitor on the global stage. I think China has spent, in the last 18 years, China has spent a great deal of time and effort to engage in a real PR war, sending lots of students to America, making sure that they pay full freight at American public universities. The Confucius Institutes on campuses across the country, really working hard to build this cultural bridge. And a lot of folks simply don't recognize that there is an inherent problem with a country that steals the intellectual property of others and uses slave labor to put it up. That's a big, big issue.
Yeah, it really is. Okay, so back to this idea of environmentalism. I'm sorry, we got off.
No worries. It happens.
Do you find it odd? I was watching what was it last night? The newest addition to the Predator series. Back in the '80s with Arnold Schwarzenegger. So the new one, and they worked climate change into they ruined the movie. Like towards the end of the movie, you're watching it, it's typical, and all of a sudden it's like, oh well, what are the Predators doing here? And it's like, oh.
think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the program this morning. Here with me, we have the Conduit for Commerce co-founders. We have Mr. Joe Maynard and Brenda Vassar-Taylor. Guys, it's great to have you guys on again, obviously.
Thank you, Paul. Good to be here.
Yeah, rare guests.
Rare guests, but certainly, we talk a whole lot. The three of us do. But the Conduit for Commerce scorecard was released yesterday, and what'd you guys think of it? I mean, let's just start with you, Joe. What do you think of it?
Well, it's always a challenge to find a way to communicate to people what the legislature did in their name.
Mm-hmm.
And no one will be happy with the method or the results. If they're not going to be happy with the conduit, they're not going to be happy with any results we ever get, right?
Yeah.
We saw that in the last scorecards. But I think it's a very fair representation of the values that we think are important and that we've been consistent on since day one, 8 years ago. So we tried to remain consistent and rate the votes that these legislators produce, because that's all that matters.
Mm-hmm.
They come and talk to their county committees and their voters in their districts, and they say this, they say that, but there's only one thing that matters, and it's how they vote.
Mm.
And that's how we do the scorecard, is what are the impacts in the various areas that we are concerned with and that we feel are the most important for ultimate freedom and liberty and advancement of the state.
Yeah, and it's a snapshot, really, also of where we are as a state as well.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. What do you think, Brenda? What was your reaction when you saw the scores and the bills that were scored?
Well, they're always the votes of the legislators. They're not our opinion. Conduit's opinion is based on the bills that we choose to score, and so we choose the bills that reflect good small business policy or would be bad for small business, and looking at when government spends more, freedoms for the individual are less. And so looking at it from that lens, we chose the bills. I think there are 26 scored altogether, and with various weights, as I think that Josh described yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
But people are going to disagree with our results, but if they want to disagree with that bill does not affect small business in the way that you argue, that's where we have our disagreement. But the fact that a legislator voted a certain way is on record.
Yeah. And so what we have here is we have a super majority Republican legislature, and really no one got much higher than 80% was the cutoff, because of the Ronald Reagan rule. If there had been more, I think, of those legislators get 80 or above, I don't think we would have seen the tax increases, the revenue that's taken from the people.
Well, that's antithetical to everything that they promise the voters when they get elected. You've heard them talk at committee meetings or just in public in general, doing interviews. They espouse these general principles that sound good and resonate with people, and they believe that they can disconnect that from their votes. And in many cases, they really can, because they come back to the county committee and say, I did A, B, and D, but they don't mention the C they did outweighed the A, B, and D combined. They grew government more with the one vote than they did with the three good ones, and they will always point at the three good ones.
Yeah.
And anybody who actually has the temerity to point out a committee vote, for example, that killed school choice or something else that they claim to champion, and then they vote against in committee thinking no one will ever really know, or they have a ready-made talking point that they've all agreed that we can't do that because of X, Y, or Z, or it had a bad thing in it, or the that would decimate the budget of the the biology teachers of America, or just whatever they come up with that they can live with themselves for.
It also seems like it's there's a lot. It's a clear policy now that you can't have any sort of revenue reduction without finding a revenue increase somewhere else, right?
Well, I think that's what we're seeing played out in our legislature and in the promotion of what the governor wants. But our citizenship, the voters of Arkansas, elected a 75% majority. I mean, we have a super majority, or 75% more in both houses, and yet we have blue policies. These are more progressive policies. Conduit, in scoring the votes, we supported 27 bills over a 12-week cycle. Each week would put out, these are the bills that we would support.
Was it only 12 weeks? It feels longer than that.
I know, really. And in that, we supported 27 of the bills, and 1/3 of those passed. Now, when I look at the bills and went over the ones that I liked, I chose 13 bills. 30% of those passed. So a 33% or a 30% pass rate on what we would consider
limited government, economic freedom filter. Does it grow government, spend money we don't have, increase dependency on government, those types of things?
I mean, we have a blue policy state. That's all you can conclude.
Well, when you have this super majority you speak of, I mean, what is it going to take? I mean, they say, well, you can't change it overnight. Well, baloney.
2010.
You can change it overnight if you have the will.
Yeah.
And evidently it's been, my take on it is to participate in the largesse of government is a preferable outcome once you've seen what it is than sticking with principles and fighting hard for them against very vocal leftist opposition. That's hard. But that's what they claim that they're willing to do if you vote for them.
Yeah.
But then they quickly find out this is a lot better career move if I just get in with a herd, and if we all resist the detractors such as Conduit, if we can all hate them and call them. It's funny, every time we're mentioned in any newspaper, it always starts out with ultra right wing.
As written by John Brummett,
conservatives, Max Brantley. Yeah, I mean, real liberals. But they say that you'll see that same language used, like Conduit is extreme, by the Republicans.
Mm-hmm.
Well, name one thing that we support that is extreme. I mean, we didn't bring an agenda to the table 10 years ago. We saw an agenda that we believed in, asked.
That already existed.
That already existed and has existed since the founders.
Yes.
And said, how can we help you implement this when they weren't the majority? And we were asked to do these things, read bills, help us get a few more, Republicans elected. And okay, well, do you want us to tell you what you want to hear, or do you want us to tell you what the bill says that you're voting for? And we quickly found out that when given the choice between staying with the herd and ensuring their futures, that they would rather disbelieve what the words on a piece of paper say, and they would vote against it and take. I mean, you know as well as I do.
Oh, yeah.
It ends it.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, they want to believe it ends it.
By the way, somebody call me if Medicaid expansion has ended. You can call us 870-275-9799. We're talking today on the program with Conduit for Commerce co-founders Joe Maynard, Brenda Vassar-Taylor. Joe mentioned just a second ago the resistance that if you stick to these principles and let's say government were actually to stay the same size or it were to shrink. I mean, I'm being a little too optimistic here, but if it were to actually shrink, you'd have to stand up to a media complex that is going to throw slings and arrows. You have to suffer a lot for it. We saw a little bit of that with the standalone income tax cut, just the straight bill, which Conduit scored and weighted it pretty heavily. It was $95 million tax cut, bringing that top rate from the 6.9 down to 5.9. Eventually, we have to say eventually, because we're going to get taxed with the internet July 1st and then the gas tax in October, so that's immediate. But you did have traditional roles all of a sudden. You had a super Republican majority legislator acting like a super Republican majority legislature, and you had the Democrats, saying that millionaires and billionaires, from Barack Obama need to pay their fair share. And that was at least refreshing, but I just wish we would have had more of it.
Absolutely. But when you look at on our scorecard that's released yesterday, and you look at the bills that Conduit supports, I just want to give you a few of those so that our audience can judge for themselves as to how radical we are. We support the income tax cut that you mentioned, the sales tax cut on used vehicles, the fee-for-service for Medicaid expansion as opposed to paying the insurance companies the premiums whether someone uses the policy or even know they have it. We supported expanding the scope of practice, several of those bills, actually 3 of them, protecting free speech on college campus, homestead property tax credit increase without expanding other revenues, attributing those, improving the minimum wage law, small business, some of those being exempt. We supported that. And recording of all public meetings, we supported that. Unemployment tax cut for employers, we support. School choice tax credit, we support. Least restrictive licensing requirements, we support. Transparency in county government spending, we support. Housing design freedom, we support. Civil asset forfeiture reform, we support. Now, 1/3 of those bills I just listed passed and are now law. So who's the radical here?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's stuff that I think issue by issue, and that's the whole reason why the Republicans got control, by the way. It was a Democrat-heavy state, and people went door to door and started talking about issues like that, issue by issue, and the Republicans were for those things, and the Democrats were not, and that's why the Republicans got control. And, here we are, almost 10 years later, almost a decade later, when you had this big movement towards electing Republicans. And the scorecard is, like I said, it's a snapshot. And it's also a tool. I was talking about that yesterday, how it is a tool for the people to be able to see, what their legislator has been up to.
Well, it occurs to me that the fundamental question is, do people want to know? That is the real question. I don't know anybody who would argue that we have a fairly ill-informed public, for a variety of reasons. But I don't think anybody would consider the average Arkansas voter as being a well-informed voter across the board. I don't think anybody would argue that that's the case. Well, of that group, how many want to be informed, and what will they do to become informed? And that's part of the thing. We started this thing by talking about small business, and that's how we, frame our positions. But small business is like you're a small business, right? Every household is a small business. We're not talking Tyson Foods or Walmart here. We're talking about small businesses. There's thousands of them across the state. And even those folks are generally ill-informed. They have no idea what this government is doing in their name, and they have to take what little information they have time to get, and what a lot of information that the establishment people, the status quo people, intentionally feed them to operate from.
Yeah.
And it's very sad commentary.
Obviously, a politician in their self-interest is going to put forth the information about what they did that's going to make them look the best.
Absolutely.
And that's not a terrible thing.
Correct.
Self-interest is a great thing.
Right.
And you're not going to go tell on yourself.
Right.
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 But there's a level of misleading, and there's a line between misleading and lying, obviously. But there's a couple of groups down here in Little Rock. It occurs to me. One of them are the misleaders intent on a career for their own power and ego. And then there's another group that this is the best job they're ever going to get. You know, they can't get a better job out in the public sector, more influential, more money, more power. You know, Bob Ballinger's on the top of that list. I mean, he can't make a living anywhere else. And that's, you've got half of these people down here like that. So they're willing to say or do just about anything to keep that gravy train, because they're important down here. And people listen to them back home.
Now, that comment is what sets Conduit apart from others. Now, we are very much in favor of big business. We like the fact that we have big business, especially in Arkansas. That's fabulous. But big business has partnered with government for the last 50 years, where small business is busy just working and minding their own business. And what Joe has just explained is the impression that individuals minding their own business, their own small businesses, have concluded after spending about 8 years in Little Rock and seeing what really happens.
You just got to watch and see what they do over a period of time, and it becomes fairly clear where they're coming from and what their objectives are.
You contrast small business, and also you mentioned families, who are working and they don't have time, and that's one of the reasons special elections are so terrible, because they know when they're supposed to vote, and all this stuff sneaks up on them. I don't want to get into that necessarily, but the internet sales tax, I do want to talk about that in terms of small business owners, but maybe broader the corporations, because there was corporate tax reform in the small business, or in the internet sales tax. That's one of the reasons they got it passed this time. It was a standalone bill 2 years ago and failed miserably. Talk about that a little bit. If you kind of see, I'm for corporate tax reform. I'm for eliminating the corporate tax in Arkansas altogether. But in this case, not everybody has a C corporation, right? I mean, most everybody, but everybody's shopping on the internet and going to be paying for this.
I had published back in October of 2017 in response or to assist the tax task force a tax article. It's been
remember that. Yeah.
Republished recently, I think this past week, and we like to, we have nicknames for things, but we call that the bill that did pass the Walmart bill. We say that sort of tongue-in-cheek, but Walmart had been a strong proponent of the internet sales tax, saying it would help mom and pop. And of course, Walmart is a C corporation. Yeah, we're all laughing.
They've always cared about mom and pop stores,
Absolutely.
That's their first consideration when they decide to build in a small town.
Yes,
that's right.
How is it going to affect the mom and pop shops?
Well, just, I have to get off on this. When the UK would not let Walmart sell out part of their Walmart operation in Britain, the reason they concluded was, this is going to hurt competition. We're not going to let you sell that. And Walmart's response was, you're going to hurt mom and pop. I thought that was interesting.
Well, the thing about it is that Walmart has 0 votes in the legislature other than what they buy. And just because they try to buy doesn't mean a legislator who does have a vote, they only can buy if they sell. So Walmart has no votes, just like you have no votes. You've got a representative.
Right.
And the representatives have to be willing to see Walmart's point of view over the good of their district.
Yeah.
And they do.
Well, and where the people are left, the public who are small business or, small households, do they want that kind of legislation? And then are they willing to support those legislators to do what they promised, as opposed to the pressure that's put on them by the likes of Walmart? I mean, we're not complaining that Walmart's at the table in Little Rock.
No, they should absolutely have that right, just like everybody else.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
but the people need to understand, when you're not willing to learn these things that we put out, then you're going to be ending up losing a lot of your freedoms that this country was promising when we were built.
So the internet sales tax passes. So July 1st, I got a message from a legislator over the weekend. It was an email from Spotify, the music streaming service, that, his bill was going up $1.75 a month now. And see somebody in the control room nodding, they got a bill as well. So this is all happening now. And I guess my point is, this is going to be a lot of money out of the pockets of Arkansans. and the corporations get that tax reform eventually in a couple of years, that's great, fantastic. But at what expense? I mean, they had to put it in there to get it passed. I'm for corporate tax reform, but I'm not for tax increases. I'm not for more money coming from the people. Again, everything seemed to have to be, quote, paid for in order to give a tax break.
Now that right there makes you an ultra right wing, I guess.
Yeah.
If you think
so, I'm a radical.
Yes, you're an outlier. But that's always, whenever I've spoken to a legislator about, how are we going to reduce the size of government? I mean, how are we going to measure what good you say you're doing? In my mind, the government has certain responsibilities, and then it's taken on an equal or greater amount of non-responsibilities. They just assumed they're responsible for a building code out in the middle of the county somewhere, or whatever you call it. It can be argued that roads and those kind of things may or may not be the duty of government. That would be a radical position. Happens to be mine, but police, protecting the people and their rights, no question that's a job of government. Well, of these other things that could be debated whether or not it was the role of government or not, those things, if they were any good or had any chance of accomplishing or making any progress, they would have. And then there would be less need in the future. If they've ever solved a problem, the problem reduces. So your money and time and effort going towards fixing the problem necessarily reduces, so that you need less money, right?
Well, they know that because of climate change, that we're about to be extinct, and the predators are going to take over the planet because they like.
This was also the plot of the Charlie Sheen movie, The Arrival.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I was just like, really, towards the end of the movie, I'm like, really, you're gonna ruin it for you. You've made it political. It's just, it seems like it's everywhere, and there's no perspective.
Well, we'll see. It's interesting. I'm sorry to interrupt, but it's really interesting to bring this up because I had this conversation. I haven't watched it yet, but there's this the new HBO series Chernobyl.
Right.
And
really good.
If you are someone who is interested in Soviet history and interested in the problems with Marxism and the problems with socialist republics, this is really good. And the creator of the show has had this come out, feels compelled to come out and say, well, I didn't intend this to be some kind of talisman for conservatives to come out as some sort of anti-Marxist, anti-social.
Determined to drain the swamp in Little Rock, it's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is Conduit News. We appreciate you being with us. We were in the middle of an interview I recorded yesterday with Conduit co-founders Joe Maynard, Brenda Vassar-Taylor. We're going to continue with that interview here in a minute, but we're going to be up against another hard break in just a second. But I do have a few questions here. Jackie on our Facebook page, facebook.com/Conduit News. So if we pay bills online, we pay a tax to do that? That's a great question. I don't think they have thought to tax that yet. But I do know you're getting those Spotify messages. I would expect you're going to get Netflix messages if you're not already doing that. You will be. I mean, it's going to be, especially for your younger folks, who statistically, are going to make less than older individuals in terms of, where they are in their careers. This is going to be a big tax increase on them, the internet sales tax. It's huge because so many young people have so many subscriptions. I mean, why do you think they wanted the tax? Because they wanted your money. And it was just too much commerce going on out there for them to leave us alone. They had to disincentivize our behavior in some way by making what we're buying more expensive. We're up against a hard break. We'll be back. We will get to the rest of that interview at some point in the next half hour, so stay tuned. The Conduit scorecard is out at conduitforcommerce.org. If you want to see your score, if you want to see what happened with bills that were voted on, it's a really good resource. In the what happened to the 92nd General Assembly, you want to know, go to conduitforcommerce.org. Back in a moment.
And the reason why it's so popular is the same reason why these center-right movements are moving forward everywhere because people are seeing they are pushing back against the mytho history. And again, all of this is tied together. The surreal world in which the progressives are pushing on us. We all know that we live in a real world. We live in a world in which, when you have unrestricted migration and you can't control for security, there are bad things that happen in Europe when this happens. It's same thing on the southern border with America. Same thing with regards to trade. Same thing with regards to the environmental movement. I mean, it gets to me, that there are serious environmental issues that exist on the planet. Number one being access to clean water. And when you spend money dealing with something like climate change, it's money that you cannot spend on providing access to clean water or keeping the air legitimately clean from particulate matter and from chemicals. It takes your focus off the ball.
Wow. That's really, that's really, really good.
Thanks.
The idea of trying to take care of those that need the basic things, and we're trying to say, no, we need to stop driving so much so there won't be as many tornadoes. We can control the weather versus we could actually try to get people clean water. That's really good. On that, ping-ponging somewhere else, Andrew,
yeah.
I always try to ask national figures this when it comes to immigration. Just one question. Is it a coincidence to you that it seems like every major country, America, especially in Europe, are having a massive immigration crisis? They're not able to control who can come in and out of their borders.
Yeah. Is
that a coincidence, or is there something more coordinated going on?
Well, again, this is where that clip that I gave from my father. It is an expansion of something that I said. My dad simplified it, which is what I say, which is the most well-intentioned policies eventually bump up against very real realities. And so the left. Now, I'm going to say this. Let's assume for a moment that the left's intentions are pure. And what they want to do is they want to be nice to people. And that's what they go out and they say. It's the nice thing to do. It's the right thing to do to let migrants from war-torn countries who have culturally nothing in common with anything we do. It's the right thing to let them into our country and then not make them assimilate into our culture. The problem, of course, bumps up is when you don't have people who appreciate or understand Western-style liberal democracy, the concept of individual rights, and the concept of equality, the concept of a whole host of things. When you put them into a community and they stay insulated amongst one another, it creates massive problems. Listen, this is why every country in Europe does not allow for birthright citizenship, and why the United States is one of very few countries around the world that does. It's why Britain left the EU, voted to leave the EU, because they didn't want to deal with the crisis themselves. They have a crisis of their own. They've watched this happen. It's why countries within the EU are really grappling with this idea. And so, no, I don't think it's a coincidence. I think everybody is sort of hitting that limit where you have progressives who have been sort of pushing this idea on the world stage, and everybody else has to grapple with the reality.
Yeah, everyone's grappling with it, so they're disconnected from reality on so many fronts.
Yeah.
The environment, global policy, immigration. It's really that does seem to be the crux of the issue. Andrew Langer, president of the Institute for Liberty, sir, we appreciate you coming on. It's great to meet you. Appreciate the work you're doing. Hope we can do it again sometime.
Absolutely, anytime. Let me know.
All righty, folks. We're going to take a break. This is Conduit News. We'll be back here in just a moment.
And the reason why it's so popular is the same reason why these center-right movements are moving forward everywhere, because people are seeing they are.
Good roof. Other crony clubs that promise discretion try to lure you in by advertising bars made out of aeroplanes. Well, at the 1835 Club, instead of an airplane fuselage, we've got a space shuttle. No, not a bar. We've got an actual space shuttle that makes a daily run to the moon so members of the 1835 Club can have some real privacy away from the bloggers and taxpayers. Are you an Arkansas aristocrat? Do you want to be? It's the 1835 Club, and we work tirelessly to make sure the good old boy system remains alive and well. Join today.
Disclaimer. The 1835 Club reserves the right to deny membership to anyone who has principles. Any talk of the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution must be done in jest or, at the very least, with a condescending tone. And finally, the 1835 Club will be given a 25% commission of any agreements made between politicians and the business community.
PHP Parody.
So,
Bringing you.
I mean, if you're successful at all, I don't know if you watched Levin last night, but that was an excellent. I can tie that.
Sunday night.
Oh, it was Sunday night?
Mm-hmm.
Well, wasn't that last night?
Sunday night.
It was. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay,
you just busted the whole operation. Yeah. So it's Monday. We pre-recorded this segment.
Oh, I'm so.
No, it's okay, Joe. Go ahead.
So the tie
people
is,
use that against us. See, they're frauds.
is that the deep state or the establishment or whatever you want to call it, the bureaucracy that's built up that is so big can never be reduced because they fight themselves and they create work for themselves. Everybody knows this. I mean, every one of our listeners today knows that mostly the job of people that they interact with that are in government, the DFA or DHS or the Revenue Office, they're not interested in being efficient and more efficient and more efficient and ending up not even
jobless,
working their way out of a job. And that's what I tell everybody at my place. You should work. You should try to work yourself out of a job. And if you're capable of doing that, I'll guarantee you we'll find something else even more valuable for you to do.
Well,
and government just cannot think that way.
And talking about a revenue neutral tax bill, which is where you were talking earlier, and the internet sales tax bill with the corporate income tax cuts. I mean, like you mentioned, the internet sales tax starts July, and the tax cuts for the corporate C corporations 2 years down the road, and then with extended, you get to take your losses. But I mean, that's 7, 8, 10 years down the road. Now, remember, the first thing that this governor that we have now did when he came into office was trying to get rid of the prior governor's tax cuts.
Yeah.
So we're not promised that those laws for those reduction in taxes will still be intact.
You can't bind future legislators.
Absolutely. So that's another reason Conduit's disappointed. You know, I wish that there were corporate tax cuts, and that was certainly part of our proposal. But why can't we just have the standalone corporate tax cut?
Yeah. We're talking with Joe Maynard, Brenda Vassar Taylor. You can go to conduitforcommerce.org for more information and to get the scorecard and look at it yourself. Let's talk about what needs to happen from here, in your opinion, as we kind of wind things down. Where do we need to go from here, given that it seems like we do have a government that's needing more revenue? It seems like we're financially obligated. The elephant in the room, the gorilla on top of the dome of the Capitol, this Medicaid expansion. We still don't know about the work requirements, whether or not they're going to be reinstated. So what do you think? Where do the people of Arkansas go from here?
I had said we need to decide how much we want to pay Arkansas for the services it delivers and reduce the spending, cut the taxes. You know, we've been saying that. We were talking on the way down here. We've been saying that since day one. Where has that gotten us? But I look at Family Council, for example, and the wonderful work they've done with abortions and how abortions have been reduced. And I can remember coming to Little Rock, and we couldn't even get a hearing. We couldn't even get our experts an opportunity to testify. And now Arkansas we're leading the country in reducing abortions in Arkansas. And I'm hopeful that the people can be educated the same way they were with abortions about spending and how it steals the freedom for government to grow, our personal freedoms shrink. And as we educate more people on that, I cannot help but believe that Arkansas will raise the flag and lead in that too. It's just not happening now, but I don't want anybody to give up.
Joe.
Yeah, I'm a little less optimistic than Brenda on this matter. I think the struggle and the disappointment for me is that with a so-called conservative or a Republican, it is hard to share the same definition of a word, let alone have an honest conversation. And that's been the struggle from my perspective, is there is no honest discussion to be had. I mean, we're not worried about the smokescreen of those boogeyman Democrats over here. They're not relevant at this point. So if you can't get what you say in plain words you want to accomplish done with this kind of a majority, then I don't see a time where you could get it done. And along the way, they're ruining the brand of the Republican Party, and in a lot of ways fulfilling exactly what a progressive would say is wrong with a Republican. You know, don't vote for a Republican because X, Y, and Z. Well, with the dishonesty that we see from leadership in this state and the actual actions and the result of the actions that they are taking, they are exactly what the progressives would say they are.
We've had, real quick, I would like to get you to comment on this. So we've had legislator after legislator on admitting that more money is going to be taken from the people and given to government as a result of this last session. Although I have a feeling that there are those in leadership that would somehow say, no, your math is wrong.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's what kind of you're talking about, the smoke screen.
Absolutely. And I hate to be like this, but everybody comes out and says, well, you know, the FBI rank and file are good people. It's the leadership. Well, the leadership can't get away with it without the passive cooperation of the overall body. And that's a problem.
Yeah.
You can't even agree on what a word means anymore.
Yeah.
But I think that there's hope in these perspective of the next two election cycles.
Definitely.
We have the presidential election, the primaries coming up, and not so much 2020, but in 2022, the state of Arkansas will have its constitutional offices up for grabs. And those primaries, I'm hopeful that the Republican Party will have grown up and will at last allow disagreement in their committees to be discussed openly and honestly. And I believe that the material that Conduit produces now, that it will produce in the future, will play a key role in those discussions, because no longer will the governor be able to call and keep one person from being able to have a voice.
That's a good point. The freedom of speech got to be upheld in these county committees in the debate.
Yeah, and I don't think we've ever maintained that we've got all the answers or we're the only people that are right. We've never had that position. But just, you know, being honest in a discussion, for example, you'll see some of the legislators going around to county committees, and they'll talk about the good stuff, but they'll omit clear bad stuff that they help make happen.
Yeah. That's a good point. Well, we'll continue the conversation, continue discussion as things go, as things move forward and progress. And it's always great to talk to you, Brenda and Joe, and thank you guys for coming on this morning.
We appreciate you, Paul, and your great work. So you keep it up.
Well, you guys keep it up. Folks, this is Conduit News. Go to conduitforcommerce.org and get the scorecard today.
Are you a conservative-minded young person and want to let the world know about it? Are you tired of rolling your eyes as your professor regurgitates progressive, PC, neo-Marxist nonsense? Then you should interview on Conduit News Radio's Young Conservative segment and tell us about why you believe the way you do. Tell us how you came to be a conservative and what are your views on government. Now, if you're worried that your neo-Marxist professor may also be a right-wing talk radio listening masochist, then names can be changed to protect the innocent. It's the Conduit News Radio Conservative Future segment. To be interviewed, call 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, Contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
Force bumps up is when you don't have people who appreciate or understand Western-style liberal democracy, the concept of individual rights, and the concept of equality, the concept of a whole host of things. When you put them into a community and they stay insulated amongst one another, it creates massive problems. Listen, this is why every country in Europe does not allow for birthright citizenship, and why the United States is one of very few countries around the world that does. It's why Europe, it's why Britain left the EU, voted to leave the EU, because they didn't want to deal with the crisis themselves. They have a crisis of their own. They've watched this happen. It's why countries within the EU are really grappling with this idea. And so, no, I don't think it's a coincidence. I think everybody is sort of hitting that limit where you have progressives who have been sort of pushing this idea on the world stage.
Bob Maloney here from ASA News, The Parrot. Breaking news from the Capitol in Little Rock. Over now to our new on-site reporter, Susan Shenanigans. Susan?
Thanks, Bob. The governor has just announced that a blue ribbon task force is to be formed.
Today, I'm asking your support for a blue ribbon legislative task force to be created and directed to recommend further reform.
Now we go live to the chamber to listen in for more information on the task force.
I hereby call this session into order. First on the agenda for today is the formation of the Blue Ribbon Task Force. Is there anyone who would like to give their thoughts on the task force?
Yes, as someone who's deeply conservative, why is the governor choosing the color blue for this task force? Sounds like he's really a Democrat loyalist. Why not a red ribbon to prove he's a true conservative?
Well, I represent Walmart, and we agree with the color of the task force ribbon. The color blue is best consistent with the Walmart brand.
I object to this choice. Blue is the wrong color ribbon for this task force.
Well, who are you?
I am Mr. P.C. Wrights, and I represent Target, and we want the ribbon to be red, not blue.
Hold it right there. This seems like a tough decision. Why not ask the governor to call a special session at a later date for an important decision as this?
I think this is something worth talking about. I motion that we decide the color of the ribbon today.
I second it. Fine. We can decide it now. Does anyone have any other suggestions for the color of the ribbon?
I think the color should be white.
Whoa. Hold on. Definitely not white.
I agree with Mr. P.C. Wrights. Maybe we should choose green for the farmers.
You like the color green because you are a farmer. I think it should be purple, so we can display how Arkansas is an extremely moderate state.
Why are we even discussing this? Shouldn't we be talking about tax reform instead of wasting time with this?
Well, the people have spoken. They believe this is worth talking about, so we are deciding this now.
Excuse me, sir, but shouldn't the color of the ribbon be rainbow to include all types of people?
Please, silence your phones.
I just received a call from Walmart HQ, and they agree with, what was your name again? My name is Fabulous. They agree with Fabulous that the color should be rainbow.
Target concurs with the decision of it being rainbow-colored ribbon.
Is there a motion to make the ribbon rainbow-colored?
I motion to make the color rainbow.
I second the motion. The motion carries because I said so.
The committee will now vote and not be on record to keep the people in the dark. Back to you, Bob.
Thank you, Susan. And thank you for listening to ASA News, The Parrot. Next up, there are reports of a gorilla on top of the Capitol Dome demanding massive sums of taxpayer cash. His name? Medicaid expansion.
PHP Parody.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is building a liberty machine. Find out more at conduitnews.com.
All right, welcome back. Appreciate you guys being with us. Man, that was a good interview. And you went and listened to that. Go ahead and do the rainbow ribbon, the multicolored ribbon. We haven't done that one in a while. It's been a while. I forgot how good that one was. I forgot how good that one was. Yeah, that is Joe. Yeah, that's you. That was Joe wrote that one. Yeah, Joe actually wrote that one. I forgot about that. So that was fun. That was fun to record too. Yeah. And lied with and now all that mentality, by the way, has gotten worse. Excuse me, sir, but shouldn't it be rainbow to cover all types of people? And also the hilarity of getting caught up in the minutia of what color the ribbon should be when it was original. Oh, by the way, that clip of the governor there calling for the Blue Ribbon Task Force was the tax task force. That's what that was. It was a clip from when he called for that. And that was back in 2017. And, of course, now we know what the task force did. They made recommendations, and the legislature then ignored some of them and instead took more money from the people. They went and raised taxes. Now, somebody tell me how in the world that happens. The only reason it happens is because they know that most people, just like Joe was saying earlier, most people in the state, we would not say are educated voters. Not that they're not educated and intelligent, but they are going to work. They're, contributing to the economy. They're putting food on their table for their family, and they don't know everything that's going down there. They don't know what the government is doing in their name. And so that's how you can have people get elected, by saying we're going to cut your taxes. And then former state representative Charlie Collins, who now actually works in the governor's office, and Senator Bart Hester, they actually tried to, in 2017, you have to remember, they had bills to actually cut taxes. They had bills, they had draft legislation to cut taxes, and the leadership, which I thought they kind of were, but the leadership said no. And they got them to back off because they didn't want to vote on that, because they didn't want Republicans to have to vote against tax cuts. And instead, you went out there and you had a task force on tax reform that was formed with the goal of to cut taxes, or at least that's what the perception was to the base. I'm not even talking to the far right base. I'm talking to the base of the Republican Party was told this task force will be to reduce your taxes. And then the first day of the meeting, you had the former Speaker of the House, Jeremy Gillum, convene the meeting with the two House and Senate chairmen, Jim Hendren and it escapes me who the House chairman of it was. And Gillum says, contrary to news reports, we got the audio of it, contrary to news reports, this task force is not about which tax cuts we're going to pass next. It's like, wait a second, well, that was your first inkling. That was your first inkling of an idea that this wasn't going to be about cutting taxes. Then you start hearing things about structure. Then the task force hires a lifelong Democrat liberal that is trashing Donald Trump on Twitter, saying that Trump is dark, Obama was light. And this is the kicker. He says tax cuts don't mean tax reform. He said that on Twitter. And the Republican supermajority legislature hired that guy. And then after a few months, there was so much outrage, again, from the rank and file Republicans who said, hang on, wait a second. What are we doing? And so then they fire the guy. But I think the damage was already done. I think he had talked to too many people. He had recommended too many bad policies. Well, actually, initially you had, if memory serves, initially the task force recommended net revenue decreases to the government. But that didn't happen. So, yeah. I mean, it's all about smoke. It's all about stalling. It's all about holding the ball and running out the clock. And they're counting on the fact that most people won't find out the truth. And all the truth is exactly what I went over. I just have a memory, and I know that some of these mainstream journalists have memories too of what was said versus what was done. But there's very rarely editorials or reports in the Gazette that go back and print the quotes of what was said in 2017, for example, versus what was done. And that's where I come in. That's my role here. I mean, that's what Conduit News has been trying to do. When you actually go back and start to look at what was said during times of importance, it's always, well, there's a new truth now. And the people who have said the old truths, that why not to be the new truths, they never lose their credibility. They are always still looked to the next time they say something. Well, this is what they said. You report on what they said, but never on what actually happened. I mean, case in point, State Representative Grant Hodges. Did I hear that? Well, I'm not really sure. I don't know if, anyway. State Representative Grant Hodges, back when they were trying to jam through this last session, jam through the Medicaid expansion funding, right after less than 48 hours or less than 24 hours after a judge struck down the work requirements, so, Grant Hodges took to the well and just read a few quotes from ASA back in 2015, 2017, about how the program is unsustainable without the work requirements. And all he was doing was saying, this, why were we told that it's unsustainable without the work requirements? And now that we don't have the work requirements, we're just going to continue with the policy. Well, so was it really unsustainable, or were you just saying, did you really believe that, or were you just saying that? Were you just holding the ball to run out the clock? What is the truth? If you believe the definition of the truth is just whatever words and phrases that appease the inquiring public at the height of the interest in the subject, then you just say what you need to say to get to the next time when you have to say something else. But if the truth is the truth, Now look, everybody's a hypocrite at some point, in some way, pretty much once a day, you know. my biggest I'll tell myself, my biggest hypocrisy is probably driving. You know, if I need to be somewhere now, I wish I had the superpower. My superpower, if I had it, would be to be able to just thump cars off of the road. Just like close one eye and be like, bing, bing, and just kind of see the cars. That would be my superpower. I kind of deal with some road rage, you know what I mean? And I'm just like, why? Why would you be looking at your phone right now? Why would you be looking at your phone right now? Get out of the way. You're going too slow. You're going too leisurely. You need to go the speed limit, or you need to go 5 miles over. Okay. But then if I don't need to be somewhere, I just, you're just driving along, enjoying your day. You see the person behind you freaking out. And you're like, oh, gosh, what's wrong with him? Why is he tailing me? Why is he doing these things? It's like you get mad at somebody in traffic for doing something, and then you'll literally do the exact same thing to somebody else 5 seconds later. So yeah, we're all hypocrites in some way, and no one's perfect. But I do believe that public officials certainly need to be held to a higher standard if they're using other people's money and they say one thing as a result, as a reason for doing X, and then they completely abandon that 2 years later. And that's where, look, I think the press, the mainstream press, can do some good things. And there are there are good articles. I mean, I've been appreciative of, not every time, but, Michael Wickline, he writes stories, and I'm like, wow, that was good. And then there's other times like, man, I wish this detail was in here. Or, I think I critiqued one of Hammersley's articles, talking about the ethics reform and corruption, and not bringing up, that the ethics reform that didn't pass 2 years ago, the people that sponsored it were challenged and supported by the governor and voted out of office. And we're talking about the late Senator Collins and Brian King, and that's a whole nother can of worms to open. But the truth matters. Remember that, Arkansas. Be safe today. The truth matters.
The news and talk of